Hey there. Before we begin tonight's story, make sure to get comfortable. Maybe dim the lights, grab a warm drink, and if you enjoy falling into forgotten corners of history, stories told quietly, like whispers from the past, then go ahead and tap subscribe and gently press like so this tale finds its way to others drifting through the night. No loud intros, no distractions, just you, the story, and the distant echo of a time long gone. Let's begin. Before you ever swung an axe in battle, your identity as a berserker was sealed in firelit rituals. Picture 5 older berserkers chanting around you, painting your chest with goat blood, and handing you a heavy bearskin cloak. Then drinking from a horn so spicy it nearly knocks the air out of your lungs. In that moment, you stop being just another villager. You become a storm in fur and bone. Tonight, we're going to step into that ritual and see exactly how it shaped the warriors everyone feared. What made a child stand out in a Viking village? It wasn't perfect posture during chores, or a polite smile when asked to gather water. It was noise, too much noise. While smaller hands tried to shape butter from cream, yours gripped sticks like they were blades, smashing holes into anything that looked breakable. Wooden toys snapped like brittle bones. Lambs scattered when you screeched at them for fun. Chores turned into scenes of chaos. You made work harder for everyone, and in some strange way, the more disorder you created, the more you appeared set apart from the rest. You weren't simply restless. You were born storm, not farmer. Villages watched their children carefully. Every household needed stability to survive. Farming lifestyles depended on small chores handled early, feeding chickens, stacking firewood, mending nets. Failure meant less food in storage, less warmth in winter, less safety. So parents pressed duties into small hands, hoping routine would shape character. Most children stumbled, sure, but they stumbled toward competence. You stumbled with a grin, then pushed the boundary further by hurling eggs or yanking a goat's tail. It wasn't innocent play. It looked like deliberate chaos. Mothers frowned. Fathers muttered. Everyone wondered what was to be done with you. Scraped knees became trophies. Other children wailed when gravel bit into skin, rushing to mothers for comfort. You looked down at torn flesh like it belonged to someone else, laughed at the sting, and went running again. People started to notice. How do you discipline a child who treats punishment as reward? Whippings became a joke. Scolding turned into fuel. The more adults tried to press you into straight rows like planted grain, the more you leaned in the other direction, wild grass sprouting sideways. This wasn't ordinary stubbornness. It spread like a rumor around the settlement. The boy or girl who kept chasing pigs until someone got trampled. The child who laughed during storms loud enough to drown the thunder. Parents tried everything. They put tools in your hand. They showed you how to dig fields. They sat you by fires telling stories of ancestors who farmed and fed long lines of kin. Nothing took. Your strong grip bent the handles until they cracked. Meals prepared with your help tasted of ash because you'd thrown too much fuel onto the fire. Even weaving tasks meant to calm restless minds only became a scene of tangled fibers yanked too hard, ropes snapping instead of threads forming. Nothing held together once you touched it. Everyone watched, equal parts irritated and impressed at how impossible you were to control. Villagers began to whisper. Some thought mischief meant you'd never become useful, a drain on food stores, another problem mouth in the winter. Others noted something else: strength, stubbornness, reckless endurance. Your scraped knees healed faster than others because you ignored them, running until the blood dried in crusty lines down your shins. When neighbors finally gave up trying to stop you, some admitted what they feared out loud. This child is a problem now, but maybe problems have their uses. And problems did have their uses. Raiding bands needed warriors not shaped by neat discipline, but driven by shock and ferocity. Order made farms function. Disorder made battle terrifying. Adults couldn't quite say it plainly, but they saw it. Not every Viking was meant to till fields or haul nets. Some were raised by accident of temperament to fill the role of storm. You were becoming exactly that, storm in flesh. Your days grew stranger as you aged. Festivals were loud enough already, yet you always outshouted even the drunks. At funerals, when silence was expected, you grinned and tried to balance on headstones. Even during sacred rituals, you fidgeted, muttered, bit your nails with restless energy. People gave you extra space, worried what might happen if they demanded your stillness. It wasn't just misbehavior, it was unpredictability. No one could guess what corner of the village you might disrupt next. A stack of firewood might collapse beneath your climbing. A flock of poultry might scatter because you felt like chasing them sword in hand, even if the sword was only wooden. Villagers remembered single moments like scars. The goat scarred with a cross across its back because you drew with charcoal too hard. The shed missing half its roof because you thought it would be fun to jump through. Every outburst hinted at something stronger waiting, like thunderclouds that appear harmless on the horizon until lightning cuts the sky. You weren't preparing consciously, you were revealing. Viking culture often marked children by hints of future potential. Some showed gifts for crafting, some for trade, some for storytelling. Yours lay firmly in chaos. There was no steady patience to shape wood into art, no eye for balance in trade, no rhythmic tone suited to verse. You carried nothing but unpredictable strength. Parents finally admitted truth in lowered voices. You are shaping into a storm. A Viking problem, not a farmer. The strange part, villagers weren't only afraid, they were proud. Pride arrived covered in worry, but it was there nevertheless. Every community knew that while farmers starved without food, raiders also starved without warriors. And berserkers, the legendary stormwalkers, weren't merely strong, they were otherworldly. Already your behavior broke the threshold of ordinary. Maybe it was a burden in a small home with chickens trying to sleep outside. But in a raid, that same frazzled energy could become weaponized. Fear fused with hope. People fed you reluctantly, punished you reluctantly, but still fed and punished, because they knew something bigger waited ahead. You grew into adolescence without guidance fitting your temperament. Siblings who worked alongside parents already sunk into predictable labor. They rose with the sun, completed tasks, collapsed at night with blisters and satisfaction. You woke irritable, energy pulling you in strange directions, noise spilling out before the day even started. The more the family tried to anchor you, the further you drifted. They began to nod knowingly when you argued with neighbors, when you destroyed tools by accident, when you turned chores into wreckage. The nod was resignation. It said, "This one won't be a farmer." It said, "This one will belong somewhere else." Growing up wasn't about choice here. You weren't asked what you wanted. You also weren't waiting for a recruiter to appear offering soldiers wages. Your own body, your own mind made the decision. Berserkers weren't crafted later in life. They were signs visible in childhood, written in scraped knees, in noise, in destructive glee. You didn't so much choose as reveal. Others might learn farming despite disinterest, or memorizing verses despite clumsy speech. But you displayed no disguise. Everyone saw it plainly. A lifetime was etched in small acts of disorder before you ever held a proper weapon. But this revelation led to consequence. When training time approached, no teacher wanted responsibility. Who wanted to hand discipline to someone allergic to discipline? There was only one candidate available, chosen with a groan rather than excitement. Gore the limp, scarred, limping veteran, assigned mentor not because he requested it, but because no one else dared. And so your storm energy, long resented and half celebrated by the village, met its reluctant handler. How do you train someone so wild that even the man assigned to teach you sighs when he hears your name? You don't get a patient master or someone with a neat set of techniques ready for careful instruction. You get Gore the limp, a man with a crooked leg from an old wound and a crooked attitude to go along with it. Everyone else turned down the job, and he didn't accept it so much as wake up one morning and learn the decision had already been made for him. His grim face told you everything. This wasn't going to be schooling in the way children were taught to swing scythes or carve wood. This would be survival for both of you. From the start, Gore made it clear he wasn't interested in shaping you into some polished warrior with a balanced stance and an elegant swing. He spat on the ground and barked out that all form was wasted effort on someone like you. Instead, he believed your only lesson was to point your energy in the right direction and hope nothing vital got broken along the way. You stood before straw dummies waiting for guidance, but what you received were insults hurled louder than the crows around the training ground. His voice carried across the field, sharp and cutting. Less teeth, more axe. He shouted it not once but 20 times, each repetition less patient than the last. You weren't graceful, you weren't careful. But Gore didn't care about careful, only about channeling the storm thrashing inside you. The axe he handed you wasn't the shining steel of legend. It wasn't balanced or sharp or even intimidating. It looked like a piece of scrap wood with a chunk of iron bolted on loosely, dull edges worn down from months of neglect. When you gripped it for the first time, you noticed it rattled faintly, like a bag of broken tools. Gore made no apologies for the poor quality. In fact, he shrugged at your complaints. He said a weapon too sharp would cover your mistakes. Better to sweat through practice with something heavy, dull, and clumsy, because if you managed to break through even one layer of straw armor with it, you had proven force without the crutch of sharpness. So day after day you hacked at dummies that hardly moved and posed no threat, yet somehow managed to frustrate you more than any living opponent ever could. The dull axe chewed ragged holes into straw, sending tufts flying into the air like seeds in the wind. Gore sat back on a stone, legs stretched awkwardly, belly shaking with half-muted laughter as you turned crimson with rage. "You fight like a dog chewing driftwood," he yelled. When you bit the edge of the axe handle out of frustration, he laughed harder, but his eyes lit faintly, like he recognized some hidden truth in your madness. Imagine a storm attacking kindling. That's what your sessions looked like from a distance. Thrashing, violent, barely controlled. You swung until your arms stung with splinters, until your palms grew calluses thick as bark. You struck not with clean movements, but with unpredictable bursts, sometimes spinning in circles, sometimes charging with all weight forward, sometimes swinging above your head like you wanted to split the sky open. The dummies always broke eventually, but rarely in ways anyone would admire. Straw scattered, sticks cracked. Sometimes the whole contraption collapsed with you tangled in it. Gore cursed, rolled his eyes, yet all the while kept you at it, because hidden beneath the disaster was something he wanted to drag out, instinct raw enough to terrify. He never praised you the way other teachers praised apprentices who caught on quickly. No handshakes, no claps on the back, no nods of approval. Instead, he recognized success by insulting you a little less harshly that day. When he said, "You only look half like a goat this time," it was the closest thing to encouragement you would ever get. And strangely, that stung more than outright mockery. It meant you had done something right, but not enough. Gore's eyes narrowed when he spotted glimmers of berserker potential. He let them flare without extinguishing them with correction. For him, mistakes weren't flaws to sand smooth. They were sparks, evidence of wildness, agonizing to watch, but promising in battle. Every method he used seemed backwards. When you grew tired and sloppy, he never stopped the training. He kept you swinging long after arms shook and sweat buried your eyes. His reasoning was simple. Polish created predictable fighters, the kind a disciplined army could read and counter. Sloppiness, partnered with stamina, created unpredictability. And unpredictability terrified. A neat stroke could be parried. A wild one, delivered with no rhythm, could not. He hammered this into you, not through patient lessons, but through exhaustion, shouting, and making you swing until your body forgot right and wrong movement altogether. You thought training meant improvement, a pattern of mistakes corrected until you resembled a warrior. Instead, the more mistakes you made, the more excited he seemed. Each misstep was carved into you so deeply, it became habit. At first, that looked like failure. But one day, when your axe missed the dummy's torso and instead smashed through its legs, sending straw limbs tumbling awkwardly, Gore actually nodded. There. A human wouldn't expect that. What others dismissed as clumsiness, he considered potential. Where villagers once saw a problem child, Gore now saw a weapon in disorderly form. The training ground became less about straw dummies and more about breaking the barrier between thought and action. He never wanted you pausing. Hesitation killed faster than bad form, he said. So if you felt the urge to swing sideways, you swung sideways. If you wanted to throw the axe straight at the dummy's head, you hurled it even if accuracy was off. If instead of attacking you felt like charging with your head lowered like a bull, you did it. He laughed as you collided with splinters and walked away bleeding. Not kind laughter. Cold laughter meant to teach you pain was part of the process. In rage, you came back swinging harder, and that was his goal. Days blurred into weeks, weeks blurred into months. No improvement in polish came, but improvement in stamina, recklessness, and ferocity sharpened instead. Villagers who peeked in thought your training was a lunatic waste. Straw scattered, teacher sitting off to the side barely lifting a hand, pupil shouting mad nonsense while tackling inanimate objects. Yet Gore hid his pride behind a stone face. Because he understood berserkers didn't learn like farmers, raiders, or smiths. They were different, and different required a strange kind of teaching, one that encouraged rawness instead of taming it. By the end of his reluctant lessons, You no longer needed straw targets. The chaos lived inside your arms, cemented by repetition. Gore limped away one final day, muttering that you were still half an animal. But he also muttered you were ready. And readiness in a berserker didn't mean technique. It meant you were prepared for the next stage, the one where normal life snapped apart under firelight, where training gave way to transformation. Because your storm hadn't yet become beast. That came when the cloak of fur and fire was thrown across your shoulders, and you stopped being a student at all. What makes the step from unruly villager to true berserker official? It isn't the moment you first break a weapon, or the first time Gore mutters that you might be dangerous enough for battle. It happens here, under night sky that presses heavy on the forest, where torches hiss against damp air and fire spits sparks at chanting voices. No longhouse walls surround you now. No familiar smell of stewing meat cushions you. You stand bare to the cold, your chest open, skin prickling with heat and fear. The ground crunches where elders circle in furs, faces lined by shadows. They have dragged you out here to cut away the last fragments of villager life and stamp something new into you. You are stripped to nothing but skin. Anything that might shield you, wool shirt, leather fragments, scraps of childhood, is pulled away until you are exposed completely, pale and shivering before fires that roar like beasts in their own right. You don't get to stand proud. You stand twitching, every muscle aware that too many eyes have fixed themselves on you. Goat's blood thick in a bowl glistens nearby, steaming as if alive. Elders dip gnarled fingers into that dark red, and soon it drips down your torso. They mark your chest and arms with crude runes, streaks that sting faintly in the cold air. It smells sharp, animal and metallic, like wet iron left in rain. The marks are not decoration. They announce loudly that your body has been claimed. The silence between chants is worse than the noise. When they pause their throats, you hear your own breath loud against fire crackle. Each rune scratches more into you than just skin. They turn you from son or daughter of farmers into flesh ready for storm rolls. Blood is hot when it first presses against your flesh, sticky by the time it dries solid. You try not to flinch, but you know every eye measures whether you are trembling or steady. Those smears across your chest will not scrub away. Even if they fade, the memory of them will stay. First red tattoos of belonging, and then comes weight. Two elders drag forward a mass that dwarfs a man's arms. It is the pelt of a bear, heavy, coarse, still smelling of animal musk trapped deep in the fur. They don't ask you if you are ready. They heave it across your shoulders until you nearly buckle under its force. The cloak scratches the back of your neck, pressing hard against collarbones already sore from training. It is heavier than anything you've carried, not because of mass alone, but because of meaning. To keep standing beneath fur this thick, you must brace every muscle, shift every breath, convince yourself to hold under strain. The cloak makes you look larger, yes, but it also makes you heavier with new role. You carry beast now as if it is fused into spine. A horn appears, carved and stained around its rim, liquid foaming inside. The elder presses it forward, no explanation provided. You lift. It burns before it even touches your lips. Sharp smell that pierces as vinegar, with bite strong as fire itself. Heat shoots down your throat the second you swallow, spreading burn deeper until chest feels aflame. You cough against it, eyes water, throat demands relief, but you are made to keep drinking. This is not comfort. This is reshaping. The horn tracks raw heat through your now blood-spotted chest. When you finally slam it down empty, your body feels fever-pitched, both exhausted and expanding. No instructor tells you next steps. Movement rips free, unplanned. To seal your place, you are expected to dance. Not gentle circling, but frantic thrashing around fires that mock you by spitting embers. Your steps scatter dirt. Your arms whip wild arcs. The bear cloak jerks, weighs down, but you keep staggering, stumbling, throwing yourself into heat. Chants rise again, voices deep and unbroken, drumming into ears until you match rhythm without wanting to. Around blaze of flame you twist, spin, leap until every part of body aches. It looks less like grace and more like storm thrashing branches across clearing. That is exactly what they want. Each jagged movement claws something familiar off you. With every step, you lose fragments of villager identity, the child who disrupted chores, the failing farmer, the neighbor who frightened livestock. Instead, all that remains is a figure staggering beneath beast fur, dyed in red, fueled by burning heat in stomach and throat. The cloak makes you animal. The blood makes you marked. The drink makes you half mad. You are not performing for applause. You are showing readiness to shed human order for beast chaos. It is not practice anymore. It is transformation. Pain is constant partner here. Cold air freezes bare feet. Blood itches down chest where streaks have dried rough and tight. Fur cloak claws heat on shoulders until neck cramps under strain. Liquid inside still scorches organs, stomach twisting into hot knots. Yet none of this registers as failure. Pain is confirmation. Suffering is part of acceptance, just as battle wounds one day will be. Elders remember every flinch, but they count endurance louder. You shake, you snarl, you keep moving. This is what acceptance looks like. When chanting recedes, when fire dies lower, you drop at last onto knees. Sweat streams down face, drips thick into dirt already dark with goat blood. You cannot tell if your shaking comes from exhaustion, heat, or transformation. Only that you are altered. Elders step forward, not with soft words, but with recognition buried in the way they pull you up by arms. They let cloak fall heavy across shoulders once more, and do not take it back. That gesture seals it. You do not step out of bearskin again in any symbolic sense. They have fastened beast across your body, left you carrying it until end of life. That weight tells others what you are now. The village no longer labels you as problem child. Villagers do not need to label you at all. The cloak speaks louder than any complaint or groan. You have entered brotherhood, or if not yet full brother, at least novice standing already claimed by beast. Fire, blood, fur, and fire again. This is oath burned into you. Berserkerhood is not contract or promise. It is cloaks scratch against neck, throats burn, muscles exhaustion, bodies blur of human and animal. From this night forward, you no longer cross villages as mischievous son or daughter. You walk as storm figure. You walk as beast, but ceremony only begins the journey. Outside fire ring still lies, stranger path. Now with cloak clinging to your back, new voices whisper about deeper power, about trances that drag you beyond human mind. Tonight marks entry. Ahead waits knowledge even more unsettling. How to leave behind humanity, not for one night, but in the very heart of battle. How do you become more than human in battle? Not stronger, not faster, but something else entirely. That answer lies in trance, where you stop being just a person wearing fur and instead break into something animal that no farmer or fisherman could recognize. And the path to that trance doesn't begin with sword drills or chants. It begins with your stomach. You are handed mushrooms, bitter lumps that smell damp and earthy like soil just pulled from under rotten leaves. They aren't cooked, they aren't spiced, they aren't even chewed willingly. You bite down anyway, because refusal would mark you as weak. They grind between your teeth, flavor spreading sharp and wrong, like swallowing a secret never meant for the tongue. Elders watch silently as you swallow. They do not smile. Their eyes study how quickly you gag, how reddish your face turns, how your breathing changes. They've seen this many times, but each new recruit brings its own risks. At first, nothing much happens. The fire still cracks in its normal rhythm. Elders still chant in low notes. Your eyes drift to shapes in bark and knots in wood around the clearing. And then slowly reality loosens. You tell yourself the ground tilts, though it hasn't moved. Each sound grows enormous. Each breath feels like thunder pushed into your lungs. Your hands twitch the way ropes twitch under strain. This is where the trouble begins. Mushrooms are not simple fuel. They scatter perception in every direction at once. You might think you are fighting an enemy charging from trees, only to realize later you have been shouting at nothing more than shadows. Warriors in early rituals sometimes attacked tree trunks so fiercely the air rang with splinters. Others dropped entirely, too dizzy to keep upright while soil beneath them spun spirals. That's the gamble. To chase trance, you risk humiliation. Inside your brain, it feels like sudden bursts of white light, as if lightning forks shoot across thoughts with no warning. One moment you are staring into smoke rings from the fire. The next you are tearing at dirt with your fingernails convinced treasure hides beneath. The elders call this brain lightning. It shocks you with bursts of energy so severe your chest heaves and your cheeks drip with sweat, even in dark, cold night. But it leaves almost nothing explains why it comes or when. You're left thrashing at things unseen. Take the example of when you suddenly fix on a tree. Its branches sway slightly in wind, and in that movement you see a challenge. 20 minutes pass with you circling it, charging again and again, scratching bark and snarling like animal confronting prey. To your mind, it is enemy soldier blocking path. To others, it is a 20-minute battle against wood with no voice to scream in reply. And yet the elders do not interrupt. They never interrupt. Another recruit chased barrels of fish stacked for storage. He wrestled oily wood, slipping, shouting, rolling in stinking brine until both he and fish scattered across ground. Madness in eyes, sweat stuck in hair, chest heaving. And elders nodded because trance had bitten him. Chaos, display, body ignoring reason. These were proof that something inside had bent past human restraint. Madness was not always failure. Madness was sometimes proof of passage. Elders keep close watch not to stop you, but to steer your storm's edge just enough. For them, this ritual is sacred. Anyone can drink and scream. Berserk trance requires guiding hands, who know where line sits between holy frenzy and useless collapse. They beat drums soft to shape rhythm. They mutter words to ground you as your body twitches wild. They shout commands not to calm, but to fuel. They are conductors for storm roaring from mushrooms across your skull. And there is cost. By the time trance burns itself down, your muscles cramp as if wrung out. Your bones ache. Your veins rattle as though you've sprinted for days. Sometimes eyes roll back, leaving you blind for hours. Sometimes memory cuts away entire parts. You may have fought leaf piles believing them armed men and forget it entirely once trance fades. Exhaustion drags you into ground whether you wish or not. Sweat glues furs to chest, knees knock together like frail sticks. Madness leaves body cleaned out of strength. Danger lurks in this ritual. Not every recruit survives without damage. Some sprint straight into fire pits. Others collapse convulsing. A few never rise. Hearts broken under strain. Heads shattered against rocks and hallucinations. Elders accept this price. Not everyone is marked for berserk. Trance is not gift for all. It is filter that chews through bodies until only stormborn remain standing. You do not escape unscathed. At one height of frenzy, your teeth sink into the straw neck of a training dummy pulled to clearing as focus point. Splinters jam in your gums. Dry straw fills your mouth, gritty and choking. Instead of recoil, you bite harder, gnawing at wood framework beneath. Elders cheer this, not with smiles, but with low war cry of recognition. Any warrior can swing axe. A berserker is proven when trance seizes him so fully that even a lifeless dummy suffers like slaughtered beast. Blood trickles from your gums. Your hands tremble from grip. Head pounds as though drums strike inside skull. You collapse into dirt before fire, shoulders jerking with last spasms of energy. Cloak is thrown across your heaving back once more. Elders kneel beside you and turn you over, glancing into dazed whites of your eyes. What they see is not weakness but mark of gift. When trance pressed, you did not flee. You let storm claim ribs and claws. Bite marks in dummy wood stand proof. When morning comes, you will not remember each detail. You will hear stories afterward about the tree you hunted endlessly, about biting straw until mouth swelled red. Laughter will follow those tales. But behind laughter lies respect. They say the trance ate you and spat you back half-beast. That is declaration. It means you are now set apart for war no ordinary fighter can match. From now on, training and ritual end with this trance at center. It becomes your weapon more than axe or spear. Every battle will test whether you can enter it again. Chaotic, consuming, mind tearing apart from body until only ferocity directs limbs. And the next test looms already, because what elders have seen beneath firelight must now burst into battlefields strewn with real men, real weapons, real fear. Your trial of trance does not end here. It marches straight into the first raid waiting at dawn. What happens when all those firelit ceremonies and insulting lessons finally break out into real battle? You wake up on the morning of your first raid, not nervous or weighed down with dread, but with a single strange thought pushing through your skull. Violence sounds good today. The sky hasn't even shaken off its gray light, and already your heart is hammering in rhythms faster than reason allows. Others sit silent, sharpening blades, or whispering quick prayers to gods that may or may not listen. You stretch, scratch, growl at the rising sun, and reach for your bitter snack, the mushrooms. The taste hasn't improved. There's still damp little knots of sickness sticking between teeth and spreading earthy guilt across your tongue. But practice has made the chewing easier. You swallow handfuls dry, gulp hard, and push back the urge to spit them. As younger warriors polish shields and rub oil across leather, you chew at shadows. Soon the first flicker begins. Your body warms far too quickly for the cold air around you. Fingers twitch, restless on axe handle. Gore, the limp-legged teacher watching from a distance, says nothing. He knows better now. He has seen the spark strike inside you before, but today he waits for the whole fire. By the time war band takes positions, drums pounding, voices rising in quick chants, you've moved past ordinary preparation. You're screaming already, not words but growls, noise torn out like it doesn't even need language. Warriors around you try to keep order, standing ready in their neat lines, axes lifted, shields angled. You do no such thing. Instead, you stomp feet like an animal, clap hands together until knuckles bruise, and tear fabric teeth first, so every throat nearby knows you are awake, alive, and not bound to quietness. Someone starts laughing nervously behind you. They already sense the split between their steadiness and your storm. And then the battle line forms. A wall of humans on one side, a wall on the other. Mushrooms take hold deeper. Sound folds in half, becomes one giant roar pressing against ears. Vision narrows, sharp, edges of the world framed dark. You don't see ground clearly. You see only enemies, red-centered, haloed with twitching aura. The shield wall begins its careful march, each man trusting his neighbor to keep order. You do the opposite. As soon as movement starts, you rip away from formation entirely. You charge across open ground on crooked path, bare skin marked, bear cloak half dragging behind. From the other side, a man sees you coming and doesn't cheer his fellows. He hesitates, because nobody knows where storm will strike. The first slice of air is confusion itself. You don't swing clean. You swing wide, overshooting, spinning with momentum so heavy your heel drags furrows into wet soil. But that same messy violence unsettles the man before you. He lifts shield up too quickly, eyes darting left, then right, unsure whether your axe will crash toward shoulder or crash into dirt at his feet. The not knowing cracks his courage faster than any sharp edge. Your second swing, even uglier than the first, knocks into shield hard enough to knock him sideways. Your hands pound against wood with so much rage his arm trembles under weight. Blood isn't drawn yet, but fear is. Behind you, the Viking line steams forward smooth, shields protecting bodies, spears stabbing methodically, each soldier part of one big creature. With you, there's no order. You skip, you rush, you scream, whipping axe in wild arcs, body snapping like rope pulled every which way. Enemies can't measure rhythm. You aim not for planned blows, but wherever arms demand. One slash across thigh sends man crumpling. Another swing upwards clips only helmet, not skull, yet force cracks neck sideways enough to matter. Another step forward and you leap, teeth bared, axe nearly dropping from sweat's slick hand. But momentum alone sends it thudding across exposed elbow. Victim shrieks louder than battle drums. You grin, mouth frothing, never pausing. Fighting bear strips away sense of safety. Iron scrapes skin raw. Blades come uncomfortably close. Stab cuts across ribs, slice through hair and shoulder. But you don't tighten in defense. You leap closer anyway. Soldiers think of protection. You think only of impact. Scars open, pain shudders, but inside trance, pain doesn't map itself properly. Nerves refuse to report weakness. You keep hitting because body refuses collapse. That's what opponents notice most. Normal man strikes, gets wounded, falters. Berserker strikes, gets wounded, screams louder, and keeps going. Every perception narrows tighter. You no longer see specific trees, hillsides, or even friendly faces. You see hot red flashes moving in patterns, all labeled enemy. Sounds boil to single internal roar. You don't know if it is inside lungs, inside skull, or somewhere beyond body. Coordination dissolves entirely. What remains is endless drive forward and sideways, sending your bulk into any gap you spot, clawing and ripping until obstacle collapses. In normal warfare, numbers count. In Berserk Charge, unpredictability counts harder. Soldiers planned for neat line. They did not plan for beast shrieking bare-chested, covered in streaks of dust and leaking blood, slamming into shield walls like tree crashing from storm gust. Enemies step backwards. Not all of them are wounded. Some retreat simply because proximity to your storm unsettles. A spear thrusts but wavers halfway through swing. Another soldier hides behind shield longer than he should, fear wasting his chance. Your body lives weapon, every inch unpredictable. Even when you stumble on slippery grass, tumble sideways in near collapse, it reads as deadly to opponents who expect hidden attack. Where form aims for trust, chaos aims for hesitation, and hesitation on field equals death. The rest blurs, faces twist, strange, strikes land blunt, kicks slam into bellies, howls tear out of mouth, until throat feels shredded raw. You crash men against dirt. You scatter bodies with wide swings. Sweat runs down legs, salt mixing into cuts. But awareness isn't enough to slow steps. Time itself distorts. A single raid lasts forever, measured not in minutes, but in number of screams flung into air. At last, silence begins creeping back, broken only by distant chase and soft moaning of injured. Vision stretches wider again. Sound returns layered. Your breathing ragged. Shoulders twitch beneath cloak, clinging heavy to sweat-drowned skin. You look down at hands, trembling, splattered burnt red, knuckles swollen, nails cracked. And words leak out as muscles collapse into shaky grin. Good warm-up. The statement rattles more than screams did. Warriors nearby glance over in disbelief, but they stop questioning. They see it confirmed. In battle, you didn't break. You thrived. From that moment, you are no longer training recruit, no longer village problem child dragged reluctantly to forest. You are berserker accepted fully, storm weapon in living shape. But that raises new question. If frenzy drives you so far, why enter battle wearing nothing protective at all? Any ordinary man hides beneath iron, leather, or wood, yet berserkers walk bare-skinned into blade spray. That choice puzzles many, unsettles more, and terrifies enemy most of all. The answer lies not in muscle but in mindset, and it explains why armor itself was seen as burden when storm demanded freedom. Why walk into battle bare-skinned when everyone else wore iron and leather? To most eyes, it looked like madness, like showing up naked to a knife fight. But for berserkers, it wasn't madness. It was message. Armor was what you strapped on when you planned to get hit and wanted insurance. You, on the other hand, didn't plan on getting hit. And if you did, you counted on something else entirely. Rage, scars that already thickened the skin, and the simple calculation that fear often cut deeper than any sword ever could. Think of other warriors lined up on the field. Their bodies weighed down beneath mail hauberks, rings clinking together, straps pulling across their shoulders, shields locked in formation. Each man became another brick in a wall of men. It worked. It saved lives. But walls are predictable. Everyone knows where the edge of a wall sits. You know that if you press against it hard enough, it either holds firm or breaks all at once. A berserker had no interest in being brick in a wall. Skin was left uncovered on purpose. No straps, no helms, no mailed shirts clattering with every breath. Just flesh, scars, and fur pelt if the night was cold enough. And yes, nudity, or near to it, looked insane. Enemies whispered that berserkers fought with no armor because they thought themselves immune to steel, touched by some god or cursed spirit. You didn't correct them. Rumors worked better than any iron breastplate. A naked opponent charged at you, frothing at the mouth, bellowing like a wounded bear, blood already streaking across chest, and suddenly your sword feels much lighter than you'd like. Because now you're doing math in your head. Why would anyone come at you without protection unless they plan to make it hurt both ways? In truth, bare flesh offered speed. Try bending quickly in a full shirt of mail. Chain pulls shoulders back, hems catch against thighs, the weight itself dragging movements slower. In the berserk state, stillness killed frenzy. You needed arms unfettered, legs spring-loaded, no hesitation when urge pushed forward. The more reckless the angle, the more vital freedom of motion became. Spinning, lunging, hurling yourself sideways, all easier, minus the iron shackles everybody else clung to. You weren't unarmored because it was holy. You were unarmored because momentum mattered more than defense. Body itself slowly built its own kind of armor. Calluses hardened across palms where axe hafts had rotted skin off in layers. Scar tissue thickened across ribs where blades had already sunk once and healed badly in crooked lines. Battered cartilage along shins, cracked knuckles swollen so permanently they resembled knobs of bone. People thought you needed steel. Your body already was steel, rough forged through punishment, dented, but not broken. Against farm boys and fishermen pressed into service, scar-thick body bulging under animal fur did the job of terror better than gleaming ring mail ever could. Cutting free from armor worked ritual purpose too. Slinging on a cloak of bear fur was one kind of transformation. Peeling off iron meant another. It said you weren't hiding from anguish. You weren't playing soldier like the rest. You were offering body whole to whatever storm pressed in that moment, showing gods, enemies, and comrades alike that you weren't there to protect. You were there to destroy. and by rejecting protection outright, you erased the middle ground between life and death. Either storm carried you through or storm ended you there. Commitment writ on skin. And so while others took strength from rows of painted shields, you took strength from movement so sharp it confused even friendly eyes. Watch a shield wall advance, coordinated, lines straight, weapons stabbing in rhythm. Now watch a berserker charge. No rhythm, no predictability, upper body twisted, axes flailing in every direction, screams unhinged. One looked solid, the other deranged. You already know which one turned bowels cold in onlookers. Soldiers prepared to meet men. Few prepared to meet what appeared like beasts who had peeled off protection because they thought they didn't need it. Stories spread faster than victories. Tales of naked raiders charging without armor told villages long before your next arrival exactly what to expect. Noise, chaos, blood-smeared chests lit by torchlight, stamping feet, tearing mud clods loose, the impossible sight of men exposing themselves to sharp edges without flinching. Some thought magic protected skin. Others thought madness lent new resilience. Even skeptics had to admit. Fear hit first, blades second. Many an enemy lost footing, arm strength, or stomach nerve before axe ever sunk in. Vulnerability stopped being weakness the moment it became spectacle. Once men believed berserkers didn't fight with armor. Because they thought themselves beyond mortal injury, the field transformed immediately. Even a shallow cut across berserker chest framed as proof, flesh tearing but storm still moving. And that sight, wound ignored, fighter surging forward untouched by normal reactions, drove terror into anyone who thought human rules applied. No armor was badge of permission. You were showing openly what madness allowed. Of course, it came with scars uncountable. Body whipped by lashes of blades that missed center targets. Stab wounds burning infection. Bones broken under strikes everyone else avoided with shields. You carried price on body day into night. But you also carried power, the kind that lived longer than raids. Villages spoke of berserkers' refusal to hide behind iron as loudly as they spoke of their victories. In that refusal, fear grew faster than bodies fell. Your role was never to form neat walls. It was to scatter them, to crack through their rhythms by becoming rhythmless yourself. Armor forces behavior. You move differently inside cage of metal. By tearing cage off, you let frenzy rule instead. Berserker legend grew not because of how many survived battles, but because of how many terrified opponents before battles even began. Walking bare into arrow rain was declaration strong enough to break lines before blades touched. So when people asked why berserkers fought exposed, the answer was simple and maddening. Safety was irrelevant. Terror was weapon greater than steel, and spectacle achieved more than shields. Blade against belly mattered less than panic against hearts. By showing vulnerability, you made others vulnerable first. And yet that kind of fire doesn't put itself out when noise quiets. Berserkers carried storm everywhere, even home to campfires and sleeping tents. Chaos unleashed for hours on fields didn't just vanish politely once raids ended. It turned inward. Left unchecked, it set fires, tore tents, butchered livestock instead of enemies. Which meant alongside fearless charging came another strange element of berserker life. The handlers. The poor fools assigned to leash the storm before it chewed everything to pieces. What stopped berserkers from tearing through their own friends after battle? Believe it or not, the answer wasn't discipline. You didn't suddenly grow calm and obedient once the blood dried. It was handlers. Actual living people whose thankless job was to grab you the moment a raid ended and make sure you didn't sink your teeth into an ox, set a tent on fire, or chase the chieftain around screaming about visions in the shadows. Imagine a battle wrapping up, victory songs starting in the distance, and meanwhile you're still halfway clamped onto a tree until someone pries your jaw loose with a stick. That's why handlers existed. Storms might pass, but berserkers didn't just stop being storms because the drumbeat faded. You came staggering back into camp carrying trophies you didn't treasure so much as misinterpret. Not coins or silver or goblets, but a broken fence post, half a chicken coop, maybe a bloody branch torn in the frenzy. You gripped it tight like holy relic, chest still heaving, face bright with sweat. To you, anything that passed through your fists in battle felt like prize. To everyone else, it was firewood and trash. Handlers didn't argue. They just eased you past tents, coaxed you toward empty ground, because one wrong step in that state meant you might smash the pot of stew feeding everyone else. Going from battle frenzy to aftermath looked nothing like neat dismount after a horse ride. It looked like staggering, shouting, collapsing. Your eyes kept catching on shadows. Any shape seemed like enemy. Even crooked tent poles resembled spears. So handlers walked beside you at all times. They weren't healers, and they weren't priests. They were strong-armed bandmates, men trusted not for gentleness, but for bulk. Their role was dragging you out of the way while muttering reminders that no, the goat grazing near the fire pit was not your opponent, and yes, the chieftain's son actually preferred to live. You often woke hours or even a full day later confused beyond recognition. Still smeared with ash, lips cracked, body screaming in bruises, you blinked into longhouse dark, wondering what had happened. Handlers were the ones explaining where you were, how you got there, what damage you'd caused, or which parts of armor, or lack of it, you'd snapped mid-frenzy. Without their guidance, you might wake curled near embers, convinced heap of charcoaled logs was slain giant. They reminded you it was just wood. They shoved food at you when your ribs ground together from emptiness. Without them, you'd waste yourself away chasing phantoms long after everyone else had moved on. Handlers weren't optional. Leaders knew keeping berserkers wasn't just about fueling ferocity on battlefield, it was about cleaning up after it. A raid triumph meant supplies needed storing, weapons needed fixing, livestock needed calming. One berserker left unchecked could undo all of that in less than an hour. A single man in trance could scatter pigs, waste weeks of work, trample cooking fires, and leave the band hungrier than when raids started. It was cheaper to keep handlers close than risk storm shredding the victory you fought for. It went further than just saving food or barns. Managing berserkers saved lives of comrades. Waking eyes bleary and half-mad, you didn't always recognize faces. That meant sometimes you lunged at your own war brothers. In those blurred hours, handlers had to tackle you hard as enemy would, grappling you into dirt until trance finally cut off from exhaustion. They had to risk broken bones absorbing hits meant for imaginary foes. One wrong swing could cleave friend from head to ribs. That's why handlers were chosen from strongest and often most stubborn warriors, those willing to take punches and keep restraining until rage spilled dry. Was it inconvenient? Absolutely. Everybody knew dragging berserker away from fires or livestock was misery, but victories earned made the headaches tolerable. Chaos on battlefield killed enemies. Chaos at camp only scattered pots. when weighed against raids stuffed with loot, stronger reputations, or enemies too afraid to resist next time. Most leaders shrugged and accepted the storm. If handlers couldn't leash it, nobody could, and the alternative was exile, which meant losing the one thing capable of breaking through wall lines in war. No one wanted that trade. Handlers caught more than just wild blows. They caught fragments of madness that lived in berserkers long term. You might scream awake at night, dragging knife toward shadows, sure that whispers crawled from corners. Handlers put weight on your hand, steadying grip until knife slid from fingers. You might mistake flicker of oil lamp for enemy eye. You might lift axe without thought. Handlers were there to press axe back down. They weren't always kind, and sometimes they weren't patient. But that steady weight nearby made difference between warbands surviving long winter or bleeding out in own tents. And you could tell who had handlers and who didn't after raids. Berserkers left alone reeked of fever for days, eyes red, arms twitching like trapped animals. They wasted food stabbing at shadows or broke gear until no one trusted them near supplies. Some were abandoned altogether, left to wander woods howling. Handlers rescued you from being that man. They kept you part of band rather than ghost roaming edge of camp. And that meant future battles still had your claws and teeth instead of silence where you once stood. The job came with unspoken respect. Handlers weren't glorified like berserkers, but anyone who knew Storm knew their work mattered as much. Warriors raised cups to berserkers who slaughtered enemies, but they also raised nods toward big-armed men who carried those same berserkers limp back to campfire after collapse. They kept Storm aimed outward, not inward. They ensured people still had tents to sleep under, rather than smoking wreck broken by friendly frenzy. Over time, even you, half-crazed with bloodlust, felt dim thanks toward these handlers. Waking covered in bruises that weren't from enemies, but from comrades holding you down, you knew they had spared your clan from worse. When palms split open, clothes ripped, and head filled with emptiness, handlers were reason you woke in a blanket near fire rather than face down in mud alone. They were link between storm and survival. Without them, Berserker legend would collapse under its own chaos. Every storm, no matter how ferocious, needed direction. Berserkers promised destruction. Handlers made sure it smashed enemy first, not family. That leash didn't tame you. It didn't civilize you. It just ensured rage blew down forests across enemy camps instead of snapping small villages at home. And that was enough for chiefs to tolerate cursed nights and ruined dinners. Storms ran out eventually. Frenzy ended, breath slowed, handlers loosed their grips. What followed wasn't solemn reflection or careful peace. What followed looked more like carnival breaking loose. Wild feasts, drinking contests, accidents so ridiculous they became talk for winters after. Once Storm had leash and leash was let go, chaos rolled into laughter by fire. Victory didn't end in silence. It ended in noise, and not the dignified kind. The raid was a success. The loot was gathered, enemies either cut down or scattered, and now the village wanted its celebration. Every bench along the long hall buckled under weight of warriors, bowls of meat and beans passed down, mugs filled faster than emptied. Torches smoked against wooden beams until eyes watered. And while most raiders arrived in tidy groups, bruised but orderly, you and the rest of the berserkers trailed in late, wild-eyed, staggering, still shaking with half-used frenzy. Your entrance alone set the tone. You didn't sit down gently. You dropped onto the bench like you were trying to break it, hands grabbing for mugs, whether they were yours or not. There was no measured drinking here. Ale vanished almost before it touched your lips, spilling down your chin, dripping into fur still crusted over with dried sweat. You roared between gulps, retelling your parts of the battle long before anyone asked, long before anyone wanted to hear. The handler sitting nearby rolled his eyes, already anticipating where this night would end. The feast for most Vikings was time to show appreciation, to toast leaders, honor ancestors, and enjoy loot. For berserkers, it was a fresh stage. You leaned deep into tales, swelling triumphs far beyond truth, until even your comrades laughed into their bowls. You weren't just recounting how the raid went. You were decorating it with madness. Each wild twist of your words made others gather closer, sometimes horrified, sometimes delighted. Because no matter how dark things went on the battlefield, hearing about you swinging axes at shadows or chasing men who weren't even there made meal taste different. Laughter spiced meat as much as salt, but celebration was thin line between fun and disaster. You didn't drink only ale. In the frenzy of endless refills, you grabbed at anything in reach. More than once, lamp oil gourd ended in a berserker grip, mistaken for fresh brew. A swallow later came the coughing, gasping, half-laugh choking that set whole table hammering fists against wood. Someone yelled to put out his throat. Another cursed about wasting precious lamp stock. Still, you leaned forward, eyes streaming with tears, insisting it tasted stronger than beer. Nobody argued too loudly. Everyone was too busy howling with laughter. Not all noise amused. Mid-feast, when voices lowered for a solemn story, you burst with full war chant. Not a calm version, ear-splitting rage howl that grew from belly, rattling tableware across planks. Mugs sloshed onto laps. Children shrieked and hid under benches. Old men winced as if drums had been struck against their skulls. That war chant didn't belong in Long Hall, but once it poured out, no one could stop it. Even handlers couldn't jam lids on your lungs. Peace cracked apart under sound of your frenzy, reborn around fire pit turned feast hall. And then came food disasters. Bowls of beans, meant as staple, didn't survive properly. Berserkers treated them as toys, tossing handfuls across hall, aiming half at mouths and half at whoever mocked loudest. The result looked like battlefield all over again, beans spattering faces, spilling into mugs, stuck in hair and beards. Fires caught scraps as bowls tipped forward. One moment stew hissed in pot. The next moment spoon had fallen into flames, sparks leaping as you cheered. No feast ended without food scattered absurdly across floors, walls, sometimes even onto sleeping dogs curled in corner. Spectators often held back tears, not out of sorrow but pure, frustrated comedy. Picture a woman trying to sip her porridge politely while bean barrage flew overhead. Ale dripped from rafters with ash raining down from torches knocked sideways. You stomped your feet with rhythms so violent the benches rattled through floor. If anyone wanted elegant storytelling, they had chosen the wrong company. Berserkers destroyed solemnity every time, and yet nobody tossed them out. This havoc was tolerated, needed even, because when berserkers took stage, boredom died instantly. Quiet was replaced by chaos, and chaos, for Vikings who lived with back-breaking routine most of the year, was entertainment itself. Feasting served more than gluttony. It tied whole community together. Bonds built over shared cup during night could last longer than bonds forged by coin. Every lie inflated into brag became piece of future legend. What you claimed, whether you really chased tree for half an hour or bit wood until splinters broke your teeth, became part of what happened. No one argued the details after enough ale. They laughed, nodded, added their own embellishments. Legends didn't come solely from battlefield. They came from feast benches, where stories carried laughter through smoke-filled rafters. You weren't only warrior then, you were performer. Your voice rose above crowd, slurring and cracking but magnetic nonetheless. Younger men sat wide-eyed imagining battle you described, forgetting reality and remembering only spectacle printed in their ears. As storyteller, you shaped how saga would spread. You pressed image of Berserker not just into wounds of enemies, but into jokes, exaggerations, and half-nonsensical dramas sung out while beans rolled underfoot. Saga didn't need truth. It needed shape. You provided it in spades. Nobody expected Berserker restraint at table. They accepted spilled drink, shouted chants, even scuffles that broke out when you thought neighbor was mocking spirit inside you. What mattered was atmosphere. A hall full of quiet eaters was useless. A hall vibrating with laughter and stories, even spiced by danger, stitched memory together long after bellies emptied. That was worth risk of torch nearly toppling into roof beams. That was worth scratching another dent into bench planks. The more you yelled, the louder people listened. Fear and awe melted into shared joke. Men told neighbors, villages told other villages. Across seas, others whispered of berserkers, not just as monsters of battle, but as lunatics who sang until rafters shook, who chewed straw dummies and then stole whole feast with insane storytelling. Terror bled into comedy. Comedy carried legend. That combination kept memory alive stronger than iron or coin could. So yes, battle ended with victories, but true myth built itself later, while mugs cracked against table edge, while porridge dripped from chin, while war songs pierced hearts through laughter. Berserkers became myths at table as much as in war. Each spilt mug, each chant gone too far, each absurd story breathed into smoky air, pushed your image further from human and closer to legend. And every legend needs anchor scene, one ridiculous episode built so loud it echoes past smaller laughs. For berserkers, that was not battlefield charge. It was not ritual trance. It was one raid that turned spectacle, not on enemy soldiers, but on farm animals. Because sometimes the loudest myth was born not from victory at sword point, but from sheer humiliation played so vividly that no one forgot. That story, the infamous sheep raid, became emblem of berserk chaos, sealing reputation through comedy rather than triumph. What raid turns into a legend of chaos rather than victory? The one that doesn't even find its target. You wake up, mushrooms still buzzing in your stomach, fire still ringing in your skull, and your warband gives orders to strike fast against a neighboring village. The instructions are simple. Follow the smoke, smash into the thatch, strike fear where people sleep. But when you stagger forward, cloak twisted half on, half off, you mistake the first shape of roofs for a barn, and the first barn you see for enemy walls. By the time you're deep into your charge, screaming, axe wobbling, it isn't enemy warriors you scare, it's sheep. A whole bleating flock, confused, panicking, scattering in a haze of dust. The men behind you know instantly something's wrong. But you don't. You're already charging, fur cloak worn backwards so the bare head rests against your chest, facing the wrong direction. To you, it feels mighty. To anyone else, it looks like you're being eaten alive by your own costume. Chickens scatter in explosions of feathers as you howl, convinced their clucking is war drums. Farmers, drawn out by noise, hold nothing but pitchforks and root vegetables, clutched like stones. No swords, no armor, not even proper walls. Yet here you are howling at sheep, bellowing thunder as if gods themselves are about to split the sky. Instead of burning houses, you set fire to cooking candles in an open shed. They topple, flame climbing fast across dried reeds meant for bedding livestock. Smoke billows, but not from targeted village rooftops. It rises from a farmer's kitchen. Imagine the shame. Battle cries meant to echo across enemy land. They echo through a chicken yard instead, where terrified hens run circles and sheep collide in stumbling panic. The whole raid stutters into slapstick before it ever starts. Farmers defend themselves with whatever lies close. And what lies close? Root vegetables. A rain of turnips, thick and solid, claps against your shoulders, bonks against forehead, rolls across cloak. You swing back, furious, catching only carrots hurled like missiles. When you stumble, slipping on spilled buckets, laughter erupts from defenders. To them, they aren't fighting Berserker Beast. They're just chasing off screaming animal man with nothing more than discarded groceries. And somehow they start winning. Not with steel, not with axes, but with parsnips hurled with surprising accuracy. You pick yourself up, reeling, blood mixing with dirt, dazed by blow from cowardly cabbage. Mushrooms twist perception further, convincing you it was rock, or spear, or giant's fist. You bellow to sky, only to trip headfirst into pen wall. Fence cracks, pigs scatter, no swords clash, no soldiers fall. Just one berserker sprawled with nose full of hay, while sheep stomp around bleating complaints at chaos. For all its absurdity, you keep roaring. Because that's what Berserker does. Frenzy doesn't stop just because the enemy is woolly. Your comrades? They watch from distance, shrugs wide on shoulders. They aren't running in to help, mostly because they're smart enough not to join circus spilling across farmer's yard. They see no reason to correct mistake when villagers are already too frightened to chase farther than property edge. You've made enough noise to count as raid. Fire burns. Chickens flee. Sheep scatter scars across meadow. To them, victory doesn't require treasure piled high, only spectacle loud enough to terrify someone, anyone. And you've achieved that, even if victims carry feathers instead of swords. Humiliation doesn't vanish. Later, in halls full of firelight, people recount full absurdity. Berserker rushing wrong way, cloak backwards, fighting livestock. They retell story of vegetable barrage louder than they recall any proper clash of arms. And the more they laugh, the stronger it grows. Because in Viking memory, not every battle becomes legacy. But every ridiculous moment, every shame so colorful none can forget, plants itself firmly in saga retellings. It's not neat victory that builds story. It's comedy so wild nobody wants to stop repeating it. That night you nurse bruises from turnip strikes. You spit out hay dust, frown deep, half furious with mockery, half drunk on ale that dulls pain. Yet even as you rage, your comrades slap backs, howl with laughter, call you storm not for deaths delivered, but for chickens terrorized and fences flattened. In their eyes, you've proven another quality. Not just killing rage, not just frightening howl, but remarkable survival, even through disaster. You took beating by farm produce and returned breathing. To them, that is enough. Noise counts as victory. Noise spreads like fire. It doesn't matter whether houses burned or pigs squealed across fields. Enemies hear rumors next town over. Giants screamed. Animals scattered. Whole farm fell into chaos. They don't hear detail about turnip strikes. They hear fear translated into myth, and that myth clings. Soon, Berserker's reputation grows not only as stormbringers of blood, but as unpredictable forces capable of anything. Destroying walls, yes, but also shrieking into flocks, collapsing fences, surviving humiliation that should have ruined them. Chaos itself becomes weapon, whether honorable or foolish. That redefines victory. Not silver stolen, not buildings razed, but spectacle. Making such scene that story outlives actual results. To warrior-focused Vikings, that mattered often more. Because silver melts down, food rots, but stories carve themselves deeper into minds. Any night's feast could resurrect image of berserker stormed by vegetables, backwards cloak, torches blazing hay instead of houses, and every resurrection inflated laughter, widened fame, kept name in songs and whispers. By now, sagas of sheep raid stand taller than notes of true battles. Nobody remembers exact loot captured months before. Everyone remembers vegetables raining against warriors' head while chickens fled, and sheep bleated testimony to human absurdity. Myth shapes itself not around perfection but around flaws, so bright folklore cannot ignore them. You became proof. Berserker legend didn't need gold to shine. It needed chaos, loud enough to echo. History remembers not safety or skill in this case, but sheer spectacle. Your sheep raid proved even humiliation could carve space in memory bigger than polished victory. That's why stories survive centuries beyond real wounds. They remind listeners, Berserker wasn't just storm of death. They were storm of ridiculous frenzy, unmatched, unfiltered, unforgettable. But storm does not last wild forever. Even most chaotic skies clear with age. Over time, berserkers who lived long enough didn't just fight. They shifted quietly into role of guides. Madness softened by years turned into advice for young warriors who still screamed at trees and fought barrels. It didn't look like wisdom at first glance, but guidance often wore the mask of chaos. Aging berserkers became teachers, shaping next storms in line. What happens when the storm grows old? You don't keep charging fields forever, screaming half-naked into spear walls until the day you fall. Your body starts to creak in spots it never used to. Joints grind noisily in the mornings. Feet swell if you walk too far. And instead of being thrown into trance every season, you find yourself sitting closer to fire pits, watching sparks spit upward while younger men swagger and argue about whose axe stroke was faster. You're not retired exactly. You still have scars bright enough to silence a table. But everyone knows your best charges are behind you. Now villagers glance your way not for fear, but for instruction. It feels strange. Decades ago, they tried to chain you down, to keep you still. Now they march up willingly asking, "How do we do what you did?" Younger warriors carrying practice blades slump down beside you, waiting to hear rules. But you don't have rules. You have chaos. A life spent rushing when others hesitated. So teaching becomes its own storm. Instead of steady lectures about footwork, you tell a recruit to stand up and shout at the sky until his voice cracks. You tell another to slam shoulder first into pine trunk until bark peels under impact. Call yourself wind, you growl, waving arm like an impatient farmer swatting flies. They gape, not sure whether to laugh or scream. Still, they obey, because the legends stitched behind your scars leave no room for ignoring commands. Instruction takes crude shape. Lessons are exhausting warm-ups that leave skin scraped, lungs burning, arms trembling before anyone even touches a weapon. You order them to topple logs downhill and then chase them at top speed. You throw handfuls of pebbles into air, demanding they strike each one with wooden club before it hits ground. The aim isn't refinement, it's unpredictability. Students come away exhausted, beaten up by tasks that appear pointless. But after weeks, something clicks. Their bodies twitch faster, their screams sharpen into raw edges. Their eyes catch fire at sudden noise. Maybe they won't catch frenzy that marks Berserker true, but they will hit harder than any neat little sword dance could prepare them for. And you? You still indulge sometimes. Mushrooms haven't vanished from your life. But where before you tossed handfuls into stomach like boy daring himself to drown, now you sip slowly, chew half, push platter away before spins consume you. You let shadows breathe at distance without chasing them into woods. That's what years taught you. The line between storm that wins battle and storm that simply burns itself out. You walk it thinner now. Rage is still inside, but no longer given free rein every night. What others consider madness now comes tempered with loyalty. Younger men see it clearly. Your chaos isn't scattered everywhere anymore. It's aimed. If child flails in yard and breaks basket, you don't fly into frenzy. If raiding leader stumbles on orders, you don't tear him down with insults. What remains is selective storm. Rage applied where danger rises, not where goats wander. Through this, you stop being feared problem. You start being trusted guard. Old muscles still lash out if tested, but more importantly, your glare alone quiets noise before it begins. Villagers shift how they treat you. They stop avoiding when you pace across pathways. Children watch at distance without crying. Even mothers with baskets of grain acknowledge with half bow. You were once disaster walking. Now you are insurance, the one everyone believes will slam giant fists down if invaders show face. Instead of terror, you embody certainty of survival. You are relic-sized, living warning sign to anyone stupid enough to try raiding. Contrast is sharp. Decades ago, even hearth fires were restless when you entered, worried you'd overturn pot in frenzy. Now those same fires mark your silhouette, calm figure sitting heavy-eyed in fur cloak. Quiet respect flows your way, not through cheers, but through reliance. If long haul rattles in wind, people huddle near you comfortable that storms outside can't match storms sitting inside. Chaos traded for comfort. Rage tempered into strength. Role transformed from beast feared to guardian expected. One thread of order keeps you grounded beyond all else. The blacksmith's daughter. She grew with you, once chased you out of forge with broom when you snapped hammer handle between play fights. Years later, she kept grounding influence steady. When trance threatened, she hauled mug of water into your hands, muttered curses under breath until frenzy cooled. As you aged, she remained voice steady enough to turn storm's edges into manageable gust. Without her, handlers might have lost patience. With her, you softened edges, learned to watch sparks rather than always leap into them. That thread of human tether wove bond between chaos and village stable life. You become something more than fighter. You become symbol. Younger warriors see you not frothing but present, scarred yet living, proof that storm didn't always end in corpse. You are story breathing by fire, reminder that savage frenzy could become guidance instead of oblivion. Memory of raids lingers on scars across your chest, but stories flowing from lips teach loyalty, humor, restraint in equal measure. Apprentices scream into night and tackle trees not because they fully believe, but because rituals through your voice keep old terror alive. And that alone is enough. Over time, halls retell not just your sheep raid or your wild chants at feasts, but also your later years giving growled advice that shaped children into warriors. Storm once knocked roofs apart. Now storm holds roofs steady while others build beneath. Passing storms may shift, but your presence ensures direction remains. Your journey becomes less about terror and more about grounding chaos into tool others can wield. By sitting near fire pits, guiding mushrooms into half portions, raising brow when fools boast too loudly, you hold weight differently. No tallies of loot claim your worth now. No scorched barns prove it. Instead, the look on recruits' faces, half eager, half frightened to approach you, shows legacy continues. They chase small tastes of frenzy. They echo howls across forest. They brace bodies against trees like you told them. And through them, storm repeats. It is full circle. Childhood filled with broken tools turned into rage, sharpened by gore the limp. Rage crowned by fur, sealed by ritual fire. Frenzy tested on battlefields, remembered at feasts, mocked in sheep raid legend. Carried through handlers, burned across scars, and now returned as guidance, crude as it may sound. But guidance that builds next generation of storms. Chaos survived long enough becomes wisdom. Not neat, not polite, but wisdom tangible in scars, in burns, in presence heavy by fire. And so village sits safer, not just under shield walls, but under shadow of elder storm whose body outlived chaos, whose stories kept fear alive, whose lessons shaped future madness into form. Others could recognize. You are no longer feared child, no longer beast snarling in sheepyard. You are guardian, weapon reborn as sentinel, storm tempered into symbol. Terror itself, passed down not by memory alone, but by ritual, by trance, by stories that shape every new warrior who dares call himself Fury of the Storm. Berserkers didn't only terrify the enemies they rushed screaming toward, they unsettled their own side too. Villages invented handlers to contain you, rituals to shape you, and stories to explain what couldn't really be explained. The fear wasn't random, it was structured, contained inside blood rites, mushrooms, and sagas. That's why you lasted in memory. History never favored accuracy over noise. Spectacle wins every time, and berserkers understood that better than most. Precision didn't matter as much as chaos that people couldn't forget. Terror wasn't just experienced, it was manufactured, lived, and told, an echo still louder than the battles themselves.